You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. Throws to deep left field by Alvarez. He's homered in 4 straight games for the second time in his. He's homered in 4.
And we are live on the True Mets Talk podcast off day edition. What is up, ladies and gentlemen, Mets fans all around the globe? We are here. We are here talking Mets on the off day. Obviously, we went, did the post yesterday after game 2. We'll do a little bit of a recap for you all here, and we'll also preview game 3 starting tomorrow. Lots of content creators for the New York Mets on YouTube doing their shows today, giving some insight about what to look out for. But again, series tied 1-1, going back to Queens. The Mets have 2 solidified playoff games at home, guaranteed, which is so crucial in terms of that split, now carrying home field advantage back to Queens for the New York Mets. And, I know that it was a game 2 loss. I get it that it was in the grasp of our palms, understood, but there's no real good right now if you're the New York Mets. But by some miracle, if you don't feel good, hit the live chat poll and make sure you let us know how you're feeling right now. I got my guy Nick back with me on the podcast. This is streaming to his YouTube and my YouTube. Again, we did the last Mets off day together. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Nick, how you doing?
Feeling pretty good. Yesterday was tough. It was tough. You get greedy, and going in, if you would have told me we were going to get a split, I would have felt great. But especially with the late heroics by Mr. Vientos, I really thought that we had a chance there. And unfortunately, things didn't go our way. But hey, like I said, we got the split. We go back to Citi Field. Let's take care of business. Mets fans, they'll be really, really excited to welcome their boys home, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, Citi Field is going to be absolutely rocking, just like Citizens Bank Park was. And hopefully, no matter what the circumstances, again, hopefully the Mets are on top. But, I don't understand why fans for the playoffs would leave their stadium early. But I digress. I digress.
And after the 7th, they left after the 7th.
That's not the best of looks, especially.
Come on, man. And I'm sorry. Listen, when it comes to Philly people, Philadelphia, when it comes to their fans, when it comes to all of that, let's be real. They're passionate when it's time to be passionate, but when it's time to stick to it, we saw it last year when the Knicks played against the Sixers. We were able to go down there and take over that arena. And, we saw it after game 1 with the early exits. And I'm sorry, they really, really like to talk about what type of fan base they are. They're not on the New York level when it comes to fan bases. I don't think it's even close.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I mean, that obviously is outside the lines in terms of what we're talking about here with the 2 fan bases. But in any case, right, we got some baseball to talk about. I want to shout out everybody in the chat right now for taking their times. It's a little bit of a later start time for me, but I know this is more friendly to you on the West Coast time, and I'm glad to get you back up here talking Mets baseball. We got Cindy in the chat checking in. What's up, CP, LFGM? Oliver saying LGM. What up from Christopher? Salute to Carlos. Salute to Jeff. Jeff's asking, no CP salute. That's how I know you're a real one. After every post game and then every post game when we start up, I always do my salute. So salute to the chat. Salute to you, Jeff. I appreciate you. Let's see here. JB's too drunk for the stream right now. We got my boy Aaron in the chat too. I definitely appreciate you all. Listen, it was great to see the celebrations as you see here to my left after game 1. We'll talk about the game 2 and what went wrong. We'll talk about the pitch sequences. We talked about it yesterday in the post game with Rob, kind of rehash some of that. And I want to get your perspective on this, Nick, as well, because I know you're as frustrated as anybody, right? Rob, myself, this whole Mets fan base was frustrated with what we saw transpire in game 2. But you know what? I figured we'd start our stream tonight with something a little bit happier, something with a little bit more positivity associated with it. And how can you not feel good? And it's in my title of my YouTube, show stream right now. how can you not feel good about Vientos right now and how he is performing in the playoffs? Look at these numbers, ladies and gentlemen. You think Vientos had a great season in the regular season? This guy is coming through when it matters, right? First time in the playoffs. What is he, like 24 years old, still very young, early into his career, and he is grasping the spotlight and he's seizing the moment. Vientos, in his first 5 playoff games of these 2024 playoffs for the Mets, he's 8 for 20, 2 home runs, obviously the 2 coming in NLDS game 2 in Philly. He does have 8 strikeouts in those 20 at-bats, which is so funny to me because at the beginning of the season, you heard, wow, this guy strikes out too much. Limit the strikeouts, limit the strikeouts. And I do agree with that. But again, something that I've always said about Mark Vientos, Nick, is that the strikeouts is who he is. He's going to always strike out, and he's probably going to strike out at a high clip. I've already accepted that. And I think that most fans, right, as long as the production value is there and what he's providing, should probably accept that because I don't think that's going to change. He has weaknesses. He has holes in his swing, as does every other major leaguer. And, MLB pitching, they're going to figure that out. But the type of Vientos that we're seeing here recently in the last 5 games is absolutely tremendous. 5 runs scored. He's getting on base. He's driving runners in, right? No matter if he's in the 3 spot or the 2 spot. And most recently, Carlos Mendoza has been going with him in the 2 spot. And we all know two-hole Vientos thrives in that spot right behind Lindor. So give me your take on Mark Vientos, man. I'm not really sure, right, how anybody can kind of critique his play right now. This guy's an absolute stud. He's seizing the moment, like I said. You see this awesome celebration here in game 1, I believe it was, after driving in the game-tying run in that 8th inning. This is just absolutely tremendous production that we're seeing, Nick.
You got to take your victory lap when it comes to Vientos, because I must say, back in spring training when guys like myself had a little bit more faith in maybe a Mr. Brett Beatty, you were the guy who was always saying Vientos is the one. He needs to be on the big club. And really, when you look at this Mets season overall, you can look to him getting promoted and Iglesias getting a spot as some of the major moments that we've had throughout this season that have led us to where we are now. And we see these same guys continuing to step up. The thing about Vientos is that even though he does strike out a lot, he still figures out a way to have some plate discipline. I know that almost seems like an oxymoron, but when you watch him, it's, he does strike out a lot, but he doesn't swing it a ton outside of the zone. He knows when a guy is not necessarily hitting his spots and he needs to come in and start off in an at-bat with taking some. It seems like he goes up there with a plan, and it seems especially impressive for a guy his age to be able to have that type of plan and that type of, the type of results that he's had this season. I mean, you're looking at a guy where you got, Merrill out in San Diego, and, there's definitely some other people, but if you see him and you extrapolate his numbers over an entire season, he might start getting into that, conversation of one of the better young players in baseball, and definitely one of the better young third basemen. And when we bring up the third base part of it, that was the other thing on him, was that he wasn't that great of a fielder, but we've seen him continually get better and better over there on the hot corner. He's got a very strong arm. Fantastic arm, and he's gotten better at picking it. Does he occasionally have the play that you'd like him to make that he doesn't? Is that the reason why sometimes he ends up sitting on the bench late in games for the reconstructed infield to get the best infield out there? Yes, but his production and his bat has been so vital to us all season. And really, when you look at him, the other thing is that even Lindor has had his ups and downs. Obviously, Pete is a roller coaster. Nimmo's a roller coaster. Vientos has been pretty consistent throughout the season. It doesn't seem like he has those huge offers or, those crazy red hot streaks as much as he just mixes in a couple hits every day, or at least a hit, and then, has a couple 3 for 4s. He's got the pop. I love how he uses center field. That story they talk about Beltran explaining to him that he needs to go gap to gap. He does that so well. He can go opposite way. He pulls the ball. It seems like when he pulls it, it's more so like of the double variety down the line that gets lost in the corner as opposed to getting it out. But hey, man, you look at the age he is. I've heard some people say he looks like a Giancarlo Stanton, a little like a light version. And I could kind of see that. I could kind of see like how he's got that typical, he's just strong, man. You look at that guy's forearms, and hopefully he doesn't, continue to lift weights and get so tight that he can't, run it down the first base like Stanton has. But I just think that we're so lucky to have this guy, hopefully, as our third baseman for the future. And worst case scenario could even be our first baseman of the future.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that, right, when you talk about the corner infield positions and especially what's going to happen with the situation surrounding Pete Alonso, we'll get to those discussions. Obviously, we're in the middle of the playoff race here. We're not going to bombard you all with off-season coverage, right, which we will be doing in the off-season when it gets to that point about Pete Alonso and his future as a New York Met. But again, right, the versatility, the arm strength, like you said, and just the overall, just like, he's got that dog in him, man. He's got that dog in him. You look at what had happened to him and the adversity that he had to go through to stay as a part of this New York Mets team in the big leagues, right? He doesn't make the team initially. He comes up, hits the Mets a walk-off home run when they were playing abysmal baseball, gets sent down a couple days later, and then comes back up 2 weeks later and does not look back from there. And again, right, I know that his swing is awesome. His swing is powerful. And the fact that you just said it right there, his conversation with Carlos Beltran, I think that they can watch, as shocking of this as this statement might seem, in a lineup of veteran hitters right now. You look at this Mets lineup. The one person that I would urge Mets hitters to kind of emulate is that even keel approach, that gap to gap approach of Vientos. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to have that opposite field power, right? I think that for most hitters to the opposite field, that's like doubles territory. And you just said it. It could be a little bit inverse from Mark Vientos because it seems like a lot of Vientos home runs come from the center field side, right, straight up the middle, because he's always to the pitcher, and also to the opposite field because he just has just unruly pop to the opposite field, to that right side. So again, I mean, I figured we'd start this stream off because I know what everyone wants to talk about. Everyone wants to talk about the NLDS Game 2 and how the Mets let it slip away from their fingers. But it would be an injustice to the way that Mark Vientos is playing right now not to give him his flowers. And on both sides of the ball, I understand he bobbled that baseball late in Game 2. He redeemed himself in the next half inning because that's what he does. And that is not that level of maturity that you just saw from Mark Vientos powering the New York Mets lineup. I understand that there was a home run hit by Pete Alonso. I understand that other guys, produced Nimmo with the home run as well. But as a young player, when you bobble a baseball like that in a crucial situation in the biggest game of your life, right? Let's face it, he was looking home before he actually had the ball in his glove. And that's a big no-no if you've ever played baseball before at even the lowest level. This kid went up there and he did not let that phase him. And he went out there and hit a game-tying home run on a pitch from Matt Strom that was 2 balls above the plate and probably was one of the better executed pitches of the game. And he still muscled it out. That is a testament to the strength of Mark Vientos. And honestly, you know what, Nick? We are not the only ones that are giving Mark Vientos his flowers ahead of Game 3. Guess what? Superstar shortstop also was asked about Mark Vientos, and he said basically he's making himself famous, right? This is what Francisco Lindor said. Vientos is doing this for himself. Also, if you think he had a good regular season, Lindor went on to say, and this is credit to SNY Mets account over on X, which is where this graphic is coming from, he's having an even better postseason. How many young guys in this league at such a, I want to say third base is like the premier, position on the field, obviously, but it's still a pretty damn important position that the Mets have been trying to figure out ever since David Wright has not been in the equation. And here comes Mark Vientos, right? Nobody has him as part of the equation. Honestly, I'm not even going to lie. I knew this guy should be up with the big league squad. I was also still skeptical, not about his bat. I knew that was legit. About his glove, he still needed to prove me wrong with the glove. And you know what? He went out there in the offseason, worked with Francisco Lindor, and he got that part of his game right, or at least enough to convince the Mets organization to make him an everyday third baseman. So Francisco Lindor knows better than anybody the type of work and the amount of work that he puts in. He saw it in the offseason where he flew out to meet Francisco Lindor to work on his infielding skills. So this is very high praise from the New York Mets MVP. And again, probably one of the best, if I'm going to say the best shortstop in the National League and probably all of baseball.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you get support from guys like Lindor, and the fact that him and Beatty have a good relationship as well, even though they're basically competing with each other for a spot within the organization. I think these are the type of things that you see in organizations that continue to have a standard of excellence over time. And hopefully that's what we're building. And as we know, it starts from the top. We got Uncle Stevie, we got Stearns, we got Mendy, and we have a leader like Lindor. And that leads to the development of great young players like a guy like Vientos. And that's what we're doing right now. And that says a lot for the future. But, all we can do is hope for that. But, as far as this game tomorrow, there's definitely a lot to be excited for.
100%. So let's get into the meat of this show while we're at it here. And before we talk about the upcoming game or games and the outlook for the rest of the series, we have to talk about what's already transpired in the city of Philadelphia in games 1 and 2. Now, you see here the box scores, you see here the starting pitchers, I guess box scores as well in their production. Obviously, you start off the game in game 1 with Kodai Senga. I think it was a surprise to everybody. At least it was a surprise to me with how out of left field that announcement came with Kodai Senga. 2 innings pitched. Obviously, he surrendered the leadoff home run to Kyle Schwarber, which was an absolute missile by on the 96-mile-per-hour fastball that Kodai Senga threw him. But other than that, he looked actually pretty damn good. I'm not going to lie. He settled in perfectly. 3 strikeouts, 31 pitches over 2 innings. And he only gave up that 1 solo home run. So again, the Mets put themselves in a prime position to potentially extend Kodai Senga should there be a, game 5 scenario in Philly, which the Mets want to avoid, obviously, at all costs, because you will see Zach Wheeler again. Not like they can't beat Zach Wheeler, right? Not like they can't beat the Phillies in the game that Zach Wheeler pitches. They've just done it twice in a span of 2 weeks. But all things considered, I think you'd want to avoid Zach Wheeler and seeing what he did over 7 innings just a couple days ago. So the Mets take game 1, 6-2. Obviously, late game heroics is what this Mets team is making a staple for themselves. In this postseason, we saw it in game 3 to clinch a spot into the NLDS. We saw it in game 1 of the NLDS in terms of getting to that Phillies bullpen. And let's be honest here, the Philadelphia Phillies and the production that the Mets bats have been getting in these first 2 games off the Phillies bullpen, it's not like they're seeing their tertiary or their secondary guys. Hoffman, Strahm, all these guys that they've thrown out there, right? These are their primary guys. These are their studs in that bullpen, which is a fact that should leave Mets fans and has left me with utmost confidence going into games 3 and 4 at Citi Field. So obviously we know it transpired in game 2, Nick. I want to get your thoughts, obviously, on game 1, but in particular game 2, because I'm going to rehash my statements on probably pitch sequence, especially to a guy like Nick Castellanos and especially to a guy like Trey Turner from Luis Severino's perspective. But I'll save that because we kind of talked about it between Rob and myself in the post game. What did you think about these first 2 games overall, the performances from Senga and Severino, and just the offense and how it looked in general?
I think in game 1, we got dominated for, quite some time, 7 innings by Wheeler. And then we get to their bullpen. And I think that when you do that in a series, especially early on, it's extremely important to put that fear in the other team that, hey, your starter can be great, but when these guys come in, if they're not on point, we can make it happen and we can get to them. Game 1 is just more magic. Another thing that I'll think about probably for the rest of my life about how, hey, the Mets once again in this great run were able to pull out another game late. And it was fantastic. It was great. And you go into game 2 and you start to think to yourself, okay, forget this split thing. I want to go ahead and I want both of these games. Let's go in the city with a chance to finish it on Tuesday. And you feel like we have the ability to do that because we get the lead. They come back. We get back in front. And clearly, the Mets' MO this postseason is to not get the lead, because in both games that we've taken the lead first, we've ended up losing them. All the games that we've won have been games that we have eventually come back. And then you look in game 2, I know that this is a hard thing to say. This is a difficult truth. And this is something where it's important that I preface it by saying you have to measure a manager as a whole. Every baseball manager, if you nitpick certain instances throughout the entire course of a season, you're going to have times where you're going to be able to, especially with hindsight, look at certain things and say, I wouldn't have done that right there. But what I always try to do is I try to think about the times in the moment where I don't necessarily agree with the manager, and then when it ends up not going his way, you have to call it for what it is. And I've given this guy all of the credit. There's no person I would rather be our manager than Carlos Mendoza. I love the guy. I think he's fantastic. He mismanaged the bullpen. On Sunday, in my personal opinion, just on Sunday. Now, I do realize that I'm playing the results. I realize that also when he decided to leave Diaz in against the Braves, I thought that was a bad idea. When he brought Diaz in middle innings against in the clinching game against the Brewers, I thought that was a bad idea. He was right. I was wrong. I hope that I have somebody in that position that's going to be right more than I am wrong. But in this particular game, I thought that after Severino gives up that home run, I would have went ahead and yanked him at that point. I wouldn't have let him give up the second home run. Okay. Diaz, he never seemed to have it. And, you gotta, I agree with James in the chat. Sometimes with Diaz, you just see at the beginning, like he just doesn't have it. And that's just one of those times. He's thrown more pitches than he's ever thrown in the span of a week, and he never seemed to have it. I thought he got a little bit too long of a leash. And then McGill, I really didn't understand that. I just, listen, okay, he comes in, he does what he's supposed to do. He should have had such a quick hook in the ninth. As soon as he started to mess up the slightest bit in the ninth, there's a few different options, but anything at that point, everything lay on the table. I don't see sticking through it with him all through that process there. I would have done something and he also didn't seem like he was just his absolute best, and he's put in a position that he's not used to. But at the end of the day, we move on. We got the split. The city's going to be rocking. These guys are going to be, these fans are so excited to welcome their heroes back. Alonso and Lindor, who they haven't even seen since they've had these signature moments, will finally get serenaded. But at the end of the day, when you really look at it, we have a split. We have to be happy with that. But if we're calling it like it is, Mendoza, I didn't love how he managed the pitching staff. But hey, you put up with it because overall, I think he does a great job.
Yeah, 100%. And like Oliver's saying in the chat here, Mendy even said, right, in an interview that loss is on him. And of course, he's not going to go out there and say and throw anybody under the bus. But, just to kind of hear that is good, right, for fans, especially who have honestly, like unfairly at some point of the season gotten on him. And hindsight's always 2020, right? You've been always on board with him. I've always been on board with him. I think the majority of people that I speak to when I do, these streams and episodes with have always been on board with Carlos Mendoza. And he has the track record in his first year managing to earn the benefit of the doubt in decisions that he makes, right? Sometimes it works, like the instances like that you said, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm curious to get your perspective in terms of, and by the way, shout out to the chat. I definitely appreciate you all here. Shout out to James as well. Definitely appreciate you being here. Mendy, manager of the year, bar none, without a doubt. I'm screaming that at the top of my lungs. I could not agree with you more, James. Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you all, for being here. Please hit the thumbs up button. Whether you're watching on replay or whether you're watching live, hit the thumbs up button. Something that I failed to mention is that Nick's YouTube channel, you can find him. It's called He Did This to Me. Right there's the @ on YouTube. The link, if you're on my channel right now, is in the description directly to his YouTube channel. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe to his YouTube channel because, again, this is not the only time you're going to see Nick on my channel. We do a whole bunch of New York Knicks content. We do post-game streams for the New York Knicks, and we'll be continuing to do that again. But, we have talked our fair share of Mets baseball this season, and they do as well, him and his father, on their podcast. So please do me a favor. Subscribe over there. subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Hit those thumbs up. And obviously drop the live comments in the live chat because I'm going to keep propping them up and we're going to keep having a conversation and discussion because, again, this is what we do on off days. We talk Mets baseball because we're so eager for tomorrow to come around and 5:08 p.m. to come around, which is such an unusual and unique start time for a playoff game. I know that many people don't like it. And honestly, in terms of just like building the overall energy and the hypeness of the crowd, right? I don't like it either. But I'm not going to lie, it kind of works better for my schedule for it to be a little bit earlier. So I'm not going to complain there. But anyways, back to what you just said in your analysis there. When you say the leash on Edwin Diaz in game 2, right? He was obviously brought in, and to address this once more, right? He was brought in the 7th inning because Jose Buto got himself into a jam. And I think that Carlos Mendoza didn't foresee that, but he wanted to mitigate any further damage, obviously, with Kyle Schwarber, a dangerous home run threat, doing what he does best, right? And I think that the career numbers definitely speak for itself in terms of Edwin Diaz versus Kyle Schwarber to make that a no-brainer. And we saw what their end result was. Edwin Diaz made Kyle Schwarber look absolutely foolish on a check swing strikeout. Are you saying that he shouldn't have been out there to start the 8th, or he should have been pulled before the Bryson Stott triple?
I would say definitely before the triple, but I just, even in that Schwarber at bat, he ended up getting him, right? But like, it's not Diaz to me. It's so clear to me. I feel like sometimes, and like I said, again, caveat, I've been wrong. I was wrong in that game against the Braves. I thought he was cooked then. I thought he should have been pulled. Clearly leaving him in was the right decision. But there's times to me where he comes in and he literally just blows everybody away. And there's times where he lives on the edge. Every count is a full count. And, he ends up getting some guys and he ends up getting through it. And I think that in the playoffs is not always the time to necessarily see him live through all those. I'm not even second guessing Mendoza as a whole, as much as when I was watching the game at that point, there was times where I was like, you got to get him out. And really, there was multiple times throughout him being out there where I was just like, he doesn't seem tonight like he's just that I'm going to blow everybody away. I'm throwing strikes. And that's what it really comes down to with him, is whether or not he's throwing strikes. Because when he's throwing strikes and he keeps hitters guessing, he's always, always, always going to be successful. The only time he gets in trouble is when he's walking guys or when he's behind and he has to throw a strike and everybody knows it. And then that's when it gets crushed. So, control is something that sometimes I almost wonder, like, when guys are warming up, like, do you not see that this guy, is he throwing strikes in the bullpen? Is he throwing strikes in the bullpen when he's warming up or not? Because sometimes it just seems like from the very beginning, certain guys just don't have it, man. And I thought that we could have possibly went a different way there. But, as I've said, like, it is what it is. We move forward and, got to keep your trust in Mendy.
And so I guess this is what I wanted to bring up as like what my issue was across the board yesterday, because Rob and I had talked about this. And by the way, Carlos is making a hilarious point here in terms of Rob needing to wash his playoff socks, his lucky socks that he had on for the pregame. Maybe wash those up, Rob, if you're watching this on the replay. So maybe it'll bring some better luck, when we head to New York. But this is what I'm looking at here. I have the ESPN app opened up, and I always appreciate the ESPN app in terms of their sequencing, and they tell me exactly what pitches, these pitchers are throwing to the batters. And Luis Severino obviously cruising in that game, right? He had 75 pitches in the 6th inning going into the 6th. And honestly, he was well on his way to giving the Mets 7 strong because he looked like an unlocked version of Luis Severino up until, right, those couple home runs that he surrendered. They just dominant. I mean, you talk about 98, he was hitting 99 on his fastball. I mean, and that's what I'm saying, right? Why abandon your fastball? Why would you abandon your fastball if you're throwing that much gas and you've already blown hitters away with it? So this is what I see here, right? You look at 2 outs. This is how frustrating this game was to me because you had 2 outs in the bottom of the 6th inning. You had 2 outs, and that's when they scored 3 straight runs. The first at bat to Trea Turner, where he singled into left field after going down 2 strikes, right? I look at this at bat. 5 pitches in this at bat. You want to take a guess at what the pitches were in this at bat, Nick?
They weren't fastballs.
No, not a single one of them was a fastball. Not a single one of them. He threw 5 straight sweepers to Trey Turner. This is a batter that has not looked good this entire series up until that point. He had like a measly single, I believe, off of Severino a couple innings prior, but it was like so soft hit, and honestly,
he couldn't catch up to his fastball all night, and all he did was speed his bat up with the pitch. It made no sense.
Exactly what I'm saying. And so again, this is the same situation, the same trouble that Sevy ran into the last time around in Philadelphia, if you remember correctly as well, where he was cruising, and again, the long ball from Bryce Harper got him. So the batter that you need to retire, because he had already retired Cody Clemens, he had already retired Kyle Schwarber, he needed to get Turner because the last thing he wanted to do was face Bryce Harper in that situation. 5 straight sweepers. That is not an adjustment that was made from the previous go round, which is what frustrates me. You get Turner, right? You got him 1-2. Instead of throwing him that 5th sweeper, why don't we try to change up his eye level and go with a 98-mile-per-hour heater up in the zone so he can swing and miss at it? Because guaranteed, if it's anywhere near the strike zone, he's swinging and he's not catching up to it, right? But they elect for the sweeper. And what happens? Turner singles. Bryce Harper comes up. I don't not like the pitch selection to Bryce Harper, but again, you have 3 sinkers and then you have 2 four-seam fastballs, and he hits the second four-seam fastball out. Again, you threw 5 straight sweepers in the prior at-bat, and then you don't throw any sweepers to Bryce Harper. I'm really curious, and this is the stuff that I wish we got to listen to, and I wish they explained in the post game, right? And I'm sure they don't do it for like strategic reasons in terms of how they're going to approach the rest of the series with these batters. But again, I look at 2 very different types of approaches to Trey Turner and to Bryce Harper. 5 sweepers to Trey Turner. And to be fair, they were getting Trey Turner to swing and miss at the sweeper as well. I get it, but that's just one too many sweepers. Major league hitters are going to figure it out, right? They're going to figure it out. And then Bryce Harper, he sees 5 fastballs, 2 of the 2-seam variety and 2 of the 4-seam variety before he hits the home run. And then Nick Castellanos comes up and he sees 2 sweepers. Second one he puts out of the yard. I don't get that. I don't get that at all. I don't get that at all. And I know that this is kind of sounding like a little bit like I'm nagging right now, but I just don't understand. I'm sure there's a rhyme or reason to it, right? I'm sure, but from an outsider's perspective, that doesn't make sense to me at all. Let's see here and I'm just kind of going through here as we talk about Edwin Diaz before he gave up that triple. I want to see what the sequence was on this at bat. Listen,
real quick on Severino.
Go ahead.
There's no, especially something off speed. There's nobody other than Mariano Rivera that can get away with throwing 5 straight of the same pitch to anybody in the major leagues, period. I mean, and if you can do that with the fastball, it's because you have overpowering stuff. That's the only reason that you can ever get away with throwing 5 consecutive of the same pitches. I don't think that's ever a good game plan.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, which is exactly why we're calling this out right now. And obviously, like, you would hope they learn from their mistakes. It sucks that they didn't learn from this from the previous go around of Severino. But again, you look at Edwin Diaz here. He got himself into some trouble with the Castellanos single, which was both 4-seam fastballs and that at bat. So that's already 2 different approaches from Severino and Diaz to Nick Castellanos, right? Castellanos gets 2 sweepers before he gets a home run from Severino, and then he gets 2 4-seam fastballs from Diaz before he singles. So I don't get the difference right there, honestly, in that approach. Again, let's take a look at Bryson Stott tripling in the sequence here. Strike 1 looking, ball 2 to make the count 1-1. Both 4-seam fastballs. After that, slider, 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 slider. And on the 4th slider, Bryson Stott finally figures it out and hits a triple down the line to give the Phillies the lead. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. I'm really like 5 consecutive sweepers from Severino, 4 consecutive sliders from Diaz, 1 for a home run early in the game, and 1 for a triple, and you lost the lead.
And didn't we just already go through this with Diaz? Didn't we already go through this with Diaz where he wasn't throwing his fastball? I was at the game where he found his fastball against the Diamondbacks day game, and he came out and just mowed them down, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. And that was supposed to be the whole thing the whole revelation that he had with the game before was that he gave up hits not on his best pitch, and he needs to just come in and throw his fastball. And now we come back to this very critical moment, and he goes back to the slider over and over and over again, and it ends up with a go-ahead triple. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. So I figured that for you all at home that may not be tracking this kind of stuff, again, we said it on the post game. I just wanted to rehash it. I kind of want to just take you all through that process because I think it's important to understand. And listen, I'm not naive to the fact that Jeremy Hefner probably knows this, right? Francisco Alvarez probably knows this. Edwin Diaz probably knows this. And there's probably some sort of rhyme or reason in that in-game situation, right, that they did that. But for me, it just seems too repetitive. It seems too predictable. And I hope that they just make that adjustment, right? I don't care if you throw 3 in a row, right? And then you mix in a fastball, right? Just don't throw 4 or 5 in a row. It makes no sense to me. Bad things happen when you do that historically. So don't do it again, please. But again, enough with the nagging. Let's get into, right, the games that we have coming up. Obviously, Mark Vientos, right, try to play some heroics. Tyler McGill also just faltered. I think that was always the plan, though, right? If everything had gone according to plan in that game, too, it would have been Buto for the 7th, probably, hopefully clean. Mendoza was thinking Diaz to have the high leverage, guys in the middle of that order for the 8th, and then Tyler McGill for the 9th. I think that was always the plan. So Mendoza tried to stick to it. It just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. And James is also bringing up something that's a good point here too. He's on the playoff roster. We just haven't seen him yet. And Jose Alvarado, and we know the little rivalry that Jose Alvarado has always had with the New York Mets, especially going back to the Dom Smith days. And honestly, the Mets have had his number. So maybe that's a factor in terms of not throwing him out there, but that's a great point. I wonder if we see him here as this series is approaching game 3, game 4, and hopefully not a game 5, but we'll see. And then Aaron here, great point as well. Again, we keep this interactive. We want to hear your thoughts. I'm just a little concerned for Taylor and Bader. They need to heat up, especially, right? It would be great. He's been so good down the stretch, especially in the month of September. It seemed like nobody could get him out in Tyrone Taylor, but it seems like he's slowed up just a little bit. And honestly, I was never really a fan of what Harrison Bader brought to the table with the bat. I'm not going to lie to you. You can go back and you can quote me from even in the offseason when the Mets signed him. I said, listen, this guy's probably the best center fielder that the game has to offer defensively. I haven't seen it with the bat in quite some time. And he proved me wrong for the first half. And then on the second half, he fell off of a little bit of a cliff. So I definitely agree with Aaron there. Let's see. Oh, and this is what I wanted to get to in terms of bringing this stream back to that optimism, or in my case, right, the cautious optimism that I have going into game 3. I got my guy Hollywood Ray checking into the stream. Appreciate you, Hollywood. What's good, fellas? Getting the split is the goal on the road. So you all are in good shape going back to the crib. Absolutely, 100%. I definitely appreciate you checking us out. If you don't know Hollywood Ray, huge Celtics fan. We'll forgive you for that one, buddy. And guess what? I'm going to be doing a preview. Maybe, Nick, you can join us, right, as the Knicks are kind of gearing up for their season opener. But I'm going to be previewing this game with Hollywood Ray, the season opener between the Knicks and the Celtics. So shout out to you. Appreciate you stopping by. But yes, this is what we needed. This is what we were asking for, is just split in Philadelphia and take it back to Citi Field where you get your home crowd, right? I think that there's a little bit of recency bias here. And we were talking about that yesterday on the stream as well. Again, a lot of overlapping between our post games and the off day streams because fans want to think about what just transpired in game 2. You got to forget about game 1 already, right? You got to forget about game 1 because we just lost a game that should have put us up 2-0. This team played competent baseball for the large majority of 18 innings in games 1 and 2, right? Let's not forget that fact. And I think that what the Mets produced in games 1 and 2, I'm very confident going back to Citi Field with that type of production. I really am. You fix a little bit of mistakes here and there. You make a little bit of tweaks from the bullpen and just like the managerial styles and decisions, right? And you're golden. You're golden, right? I don't think there's anything drastic that the Mets have to change because they were in the driver's seat for a large majority and were well on their way to a 2-0 series lead. And it just so happened that the Philadelphia Phillies snapped out of it and they executed just once or twice more when it mattered the most in the later innings of games 1 and 2. So what are the vibes like, Nick? What are the vibes like before we get into this little preview here that we got on the next couple slides?
Hey, listen, for sure, we should definitely, if anybody tells you beforehand that we would have a split against the Phillies in the NLDS going back home to Philly, would be very, very happy. Okay. So, yes, we have to be happy about that overall. I think that other Mets fans and myself, the part that gets us feeling a little bit like, what if, is that Vientos home run? If we just go away quietly right there, we give up the lead. But when Vientos hits that home run, you start to think, yo, this shit is magic and nothing can stop us. We're going to figure it out. This is what we do. This is just what we do. And what we have seen from this team throughout the season, and I've seen it in the chat, is that Diaz usually comes back after a bad outing and comes back and, is throwing fastballs. So he's flaming out there and he gets it done. And, I'm telling you, man, this is a thing. You watch Diaz. When Diaz is looking in for the pitch, right? When he first comes in, when he comes in and he's looking in for the pitch, if his nostrils flare, he's about to destroy. He's about to be the man. If the nostrils don't flare, then the stuff is not there. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm telling you, watch for the nostrils. And overall, when you look at this team, we have been very resilient throughout the season. We have had losses that felt like they were crushing, losses that way back in May, and pretty much almost in every single month, you had a time where you had a loss and you were like, is that the season right there? And every single day, they would always come back and they'd give you a reason to believe. We've had tough stretches. Can't deal with any tough stretches this time of the year, but hopefully we put that game behind us. You know that this team has the resiliency. You know that being led by a guy like Lindor, going all the way up to, everybody else, as I've mentioned before, we have the right people in place to have the right mindset, but at the end of the day, you got to get it done. And, hey, we'll talk about here shortly what it is we're going to need to do to be able to get that dub and be able to have a chance to close this game out in Citi Field on Wednesday.
Yes, 100%. Oliver saying the nostril indicator. I love it. Yeah, I mean, there it is. You got to watch out for it. And Oliver's also piggybacking off of that statement saying, let's state the obvious. The Mets could play great and still lose to the Phillies. There are no slouches in the playoffs. I just want them to play well and go as far as possible. That's also very valid. Let's not underestimate and undercut the talent that the Phillies have. I think that's a great point. Like at this point of the season and this juncture of the playoffs, even if you play a competent game, right? I mean, you could still lose. And that's just a fact of the matter. And also, right, to just look around the league, if the score holds right now for the Yankees, every single NLDS matchup, both in the American League and in the National League, would be split at 1-1. So maybe that's a comfortability factor. I don't know if that makes you guys feel better.
That's the story of baseball all year, right? It's been a season of parity. It's been the wide open season. That's what everybody said all year. There's no dominant team.
Yeah, 100% agree. So let's take a look at a preview here. Got 2 slides as it relates to the guys that are going to be going tomorrow in game 3, and then how the rest of the series could shake out in terms of the pitching matchups, etc. Aaron Nola, longtime Philly, his entire career, I believe, since 2015, has seen the Mets a lot of times over these 8-9 years at this point of his career, versus Sean Manaea. You see the regular season statistics between these two pitchers. They have seen each other, these lineups, right, have seen both pitchers a multitude of times. I believe Nola only has 2 starts, if I'm not mistaken, against the Mets this year, and then Sean Manaea has 3 starts against the Phillies. Aaron Nola's statistics against the Mets: 13 in the 3rd innings pitch, 6 earned runs given up. All 6 of those earned runs happen to be in his second start, because on May 15th or May 14th of this year, he pitched a complete game shutout, and he was absolutely dominant against the Mets lineup that doesn't resemble anything of what it's like, on the offensive perspective for the New York Mets right now. So let's just get that out of the way. Sean Manaea, conversely, You see here 16 and 2/3 innings pitched, 10 earned runs. Again, one of those starts he gave up, I want to say like 6 earned runs. So that heavily skews those numbers in terms of the earned run category. And I think just recently he pitched 7 innings of 3-run ball back on September 27th in that series at Citi Field, if I'm not mistaken. So again, lots of familiarity here. Aaron Nola in general against the Mets in his career, not like that matters because we're in the year 2024, but in general, he's got 200 plus strikeouts against the Mets, and it seems like he has pretty good numbers against the Mets. But again, this 2024 team is unlike any other previous team that Nola has seen, maybe outside of the 2015 team. But again, I think this team is better than 2022. I'm going to stand by that statement. I always have, and I always will. This team is not like the last couple of years Mets, and that's important to know. So pitching matchup, you got your best starter. They don't have their best starter, but they have a pretty damn good starter going for them. They purposely moved Christopher Sanchez to start that game too because of his home and away splits. And Aaron Nola also has done historically, I think Rob went into the splits earlier, but has done historically a little bit of a worse job than he does at home. But again, he's that veteran presence, and that's why they chose to go that route, because Aaron Nola could and can hold his own in just loud environments that Citi Field is going to impose on the Phillies. So take me through this pitching matchup. Take me through this game. What are you looking out for lineup-wise between these two pitchers? I think of Sean Manaea's 89 pitches that he threw last time out against the Phillies on September 27th, 60 of them were sinkers. 60. Then followed by 17, I think, sweepers, and then 2 four-seam fastballs. My math is somewhere off there, but he threw the predominant, amount of pitches as the 2-seam sinker, which goes obviously as a lefty. I would assume that goes into righty or into lefty and away from into lefties away from righties. Yes, correct. So what do you have here? What do you have on this game?
So first and foremost, the atmosphere is going to be electric. Somebody who has attended playoff games in Shea Stadium, not in Citi, but Shea Stadium, we used to actually get it shaken back in the day. 2006, Game 6 and 7 of the NLCS against the Cardinals. Game 6 was one of the greatest nights of my life. Game 7, one of the worst nights of my life. It's going to be electric, that, and like I said, this team has given their fans so many reasons to rejoice, and they've done it all away from them. So I think there's just going to be an overwhelming energy in the building from the very beginning. And I think that the Mets need to capitalize on that by scoring some early runs. I think that, Lindor getting off to a hot start, obviously from that leadoff spot, could mean a lot, but I think we just need to put some at-bats together. We've done it with, the station-to-station baseball. This last game, we all of a sudden decided to start hitting the ball out of the yard, and we had 4 home runs. We're not playing in quite such a tiny little park like Citizens Bank, but we have proven that, we have enough guys with the type of power that can, get it to the seats in Citi Field. It's not the old days of Citi Field when no one could hit a home run there. And, Alvarez, I could definitely see him putting a charge into one. And I don't ever want to see Bader starting again. It should be Tyrone Taylor. Tyrone Taylor had a tough start to the playoffs. And I understand why Mendoza was maybe thinking, hey, let's get this guy a day and let's see if we can catch lightning in a bottle. But no, it needs to be Tyrone Taylor moving forward, and he's still an excellent defender, so you're not losing too much there. From what I've seen out of JD here recently, let's just go ahead and pencil him into the DH. Okay, the Winker at bats, I understand that Winker has had some huge moments for us, and he's had some big walks, and he can steal a base. And I really, at the end of the day, can't question anything Mendoza decides to do as far as the lineup. He's been pushing all the right buttons. And typically he finds a way to get both of those guys in the game throughout the course of it at some point anyway. But I've liked what I've seen JD. He's starting to get hot again. We saw what happened with him when this entire entire season turned around. We saw what can happen, what JD can be when he gets hot. And what we really need more than anything else tomorrow is we need Sean Manaea to step up and have one of those classic legacy performances. You know, we get out there, we get a couple runs, and this guy just comes out and then is absolutely dominant like we've seen him be. Throughout the entire season, we saw him be our best starter. And we saw one stint from him where he was just absolutely lights out. We saw one of those from Quintana. We saw one of those from Severino. But out of everybody, Manaea's was the most dominant because he was like the best pitcher in baseball for a little stretch there. And if we can see him come out and we can see him neutralize especially the Schwarbers and the Harpers of the world and write your legacy, Sean Manaea. Make yourself a guy that we will talk about forever. Let's make this the Sean Manaea game. He needs to come out. He needs to get it done, and I believe he will. I'm predicting 8 scoreless from him tomorrow, and the Mets win 3-0, and we go into Game 3 on Wednesday with Quintana coming up and continuing his scoreless streak in the playoffs, and we send them back to Philly crying.
I don't know how I can follow that up, really. And I think Carlos agrees with you, to be honest with you. Manaea will go 8, Diaz for the save. And this has a real potential to be right, again, change the narrative type of game, write your legacy, however you want to put it, but one that gets him back on track because, he had a pretty decent start, I will say, only over 5 innings pitched in Milwaukee. It was decent. It wasn't like a Sean Manaea-esque performance that we've seen for the majority of this year, but it was pretty decent. But prior to this year, right, prior to this playoff run, Sean Manaea in his career, in the short sample size, has not been good. And he actually faced this Phillies lineup, right, that has a lot of the same guys from 2022 when he was a San Diego Padre. He was in there for relief, and he gave up like 5 or 6 runs in an inning. And again, it was just a whole debacle. And I think a reporter actually asked him about that. And he said, you know what? They're a different team. Although they still have some of the same guys, obviously. But he said, I'm a different pitcher. And you know what? I'm looking forward to it, to getting back out there and just proving myself. And, this could be one of those games, like you said. This has to be, I think, one of those games to set the tone from the pitching perspective. Hopefully the offense gets involved early and often, not just early. It has to be often. And that's something that they did. I will give them credit in Game 2, right? They put up 3 runs. They tied it. Nimmo puts them back up the next half inning, right? And then the Phillies go up. The Mets tie it again. And it's just like, never say never with this team. So the run production has been there. It's not like it hasn't been there. 12 runs over 2 games, that's pretty damn good. I think if the pitching does its job, right, and it did in Game 1, if they did it in Game 2, this is a 2-0 lead, man. This is a 2-0 lead. So, yeah, 100%, I agree with you. I'm confident. And, again, you know what Nola's going to throw. I mean, his bread and butter is that curveball. It's a loopy curveball, and it's vastly different than like that 94, 95, I believe he throws as the 4-seam fastball. So that adjustment is really hard to make. But again, you cannot be guessing fastball, right? I mean, you cannot be guessing curveball. What do I always preach, especially with this Mets lineup, when you have a guy that throws some pretty damn good off speed and then gets you caught looking and caught foolish and not even being able to pull the trigger on a fastball? You need to sit fastball and then adjust curveball. That's what the strategy and that's what the game plan has to be for this Mets offense. And again, you know what? There's no harm in singling them to death. Like we just said, death by a million cuts. And I said this right in the preview. I said there's multiple ways to win a baseball game in the playoffs. I said you can either do that by just stringing hits together, which the Mets have been proven they can do, and you can also just beat them by the long ball or gap-to-gap power, which they did in Game 2, right? Those are 2 different games that the offense has put together, and I distinctly remember on our live stream, the last off day going into the series, that's exactly what I said. So, simple. Go out there and win. Change the narrative, and you got to go in there and hope for a Game 4 being a potential elimination game for the Philadelphia Phillies. Right? In front of your home crowd. That's what you need to get to. And then just finish the job because you don't want to go back to Philly at all costs. Again, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but you don't want to go back to Philly. Last slide here before we finish things up as we're approaching 10:30 p.m. I definitely appreciate you all being here again. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the He Did This to Me podcast. Link is in the description down below. These are your pitchers, presumably, and how things will shake up should this game, or obviously the series is going 4, but should this go 5. You're going to have Sean Manaea and Aaron Nola battling and dueling tomorrow, right? You're going to probably have Jose Quintana versus Ranger Suarez in game 4 as your starting probables, no matter what happens tomorrow. Game 5 gets a little interesting because clearly and obviously the Phillies are going to throw Zach Wheeler again. They don't have a starting pitcher 5 on their playoff roster, so they have to go with Zach Wheeler again on regular rest. That makes sense. The Mets probably go Kodai Senga for game 5, I would have to imagine, if it gets there. But what do you do in games 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 behind Sean Manaea and Jose Quintana if you're the New York Mets? And the same situation kind of applies here for Philly, because I'm assuming the Phillies are going to expect length out of Zach Wheeler should there be a game 5. Christopher Sanchez, with this off day right now, with the off day that would happen between games 4 and 5, would also be on regular rest because he just pitched on Sunday, as would Luis Severino. So you have these starting pitchers, again, that would be available. How do you play it on both sides? Christopher Sanchez could maybe piggyback off of Ranger Suarez or Aaron Nola in the games 3 or 4, and you can have the same situation with Luis Severino for the New York Mets. But you also have Tyler McGill, who I know you're not the biggest fan of, especially in crucial situations. And honestly,
I love
to agree with you.
Bring him in the third or fourth bring him in the third or the fourth for a few innings. You know what I mean?
Not the ninth, right?
I just don't see just throwing that guy into that situation for the first time in his life. But hey, again, David Peterson got thrown. The exact same thing happened to him, and he was fucking fantastic. So you never know, man. You never know.
Right. And that's what I was going with too, is like, how do you utilize the bullpen that you already have on a regular basis with the availability of David Peterson and Tyler McGill also available out of your bullpen? It's all hands on deck. Like, I think both of these managers have options, but with the variety of names that the Mets have, they should have the advantage in terms of the guys that are well rested and guys that have started for you all year long. And David Peterson and Tyler McGill, they're available out of your pen. So that can give you a lot of innings should anything happen, in the early stages of the game to a Sean Manaea or Jose Quintana, right? But again, this is to the discretion. And sometimes having more options really is the thing, because maybe you start to overthink, right? If you're Carlos Mendoza. So again, very curious to see how this plays out. But also, I really think Ryan Stanek, right? Maybe you throw Ryan Stanek in that 9th inning in game 2, right? Maybe you throw Ryan Stanek, because I'm not gonna lie, I would have rather seen Ryan Stanek.
That's what I was screaming for, even though he didn't look great in game 1. He didn't. He's looked better as of late than he looked in game 1 in particular. But I thought that, yeah, man, that's exactly what I was thinking. Was like, yo, go ahead and bring him in the 9th yesterday. But hey, man, it worked out the way that it did. In Mendy, we trust.
Absolutely, 100%. So this is the outlook for the rest of the games. Obviously, we just went over a little bit of a preview. Didn't want to tease too much. We're going on the pregame tomorrow. We're just about an hour in on this podcast episode as well. I think we're going to end it here, but I definitely want to get to some more comments here before we do end it. Daniel is saying, oh, look at my guy, Daniel, living large. Hope to see you all there tomorrow. I definitely won't be in attendance. But you have fun in that suite. First time ever in a suite. You enjoy it. You deserve it. I appreciate the support on this stream. And yeah, you gotta thank, I don't know, like, you gotta reciprocate, right, in some way. Your buddy, his dad hooking you up with these tickets. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Go enjoy that time. It's gonna be a blast and it's gonna be electric. Carlos is saying the key aspect that will determine Manaea's success tomorrow is how much will he rely on that high fastball he uses to set up the sweeper. Be careful. Phillies like the high fastball, hate the low.
That's a tough one, though, because he's been so successful with that pitch. To try to go away from it, that's a tough one to ask of this guy. I don't know exactly how you play that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe that's my homework for today in terms of how Sean Manaea was utilizing those 60 sweepers that he went with in the last go around against Philly. So I don't know. All I know is that he likes that sinker, right? He loves the fastball, especially the 2-seamer with a little bit movement to set up that sweeper. I'm very curious to see how they attack this Phillies lineup, especially knowing what they know now of the pitch sequences from both Edwin Diaz and Luis Severino, the fastball versus the sweeper to that Phillies lineup, and who has success versus what, especially like 4 or 5 times in a row. Just please don't do that. But yeah, I appreciate everyone. I appreciate it. Spamming the W's. Hopefully on the post game tomorrow, spamming the W's. We're going to be live, myself and Rob, for the pregame and the post game. Hopefully it's electric, right? I understand that it's a tough time in terms of the actual scheduling of it, and MLB has been playing all the wrong cards here in the playoffs, it seems like. But you know what? It is what it is. We got you covered. Mets baseball is a priority here for us, and you got to set the tone. You got to take game one, and then you know what? Things happen in a weird way where you can end this thing at home. That's what happens when you split. Take it back home. You have the home field advantage, and that's what happens. So I appreciate it. Again, you know my hashtag. You know what I'm going to say. I know it's Mets win on X, but it's changed the narrative over here on the CP New York Sports YouTube channel and the True Mets Talk podcast. Thank you for watching this stream. Final thoughts, final words, Nick. I appreciate you taking the time here as well on this evening talking Mets baseball. What you got for me?
We got the split. We always battle. We always respond. Manaya is going to throw an October classic 8-strong. Pete's going to hit a home run in his first at bat. You heard it here first. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Hopefully those predictions do ring true. Feeling confident, cautious optimism over here. Again, this team has proven time and time again, when they get knocked down, they will stand back up. Let's go Mets. Change the narrative. Catch you all tomorrow. It's either going to be 3:15 or 3:30 for the pregame, and then live on the channel for the postgame. Catch you all here. Bring the hype, bring the energy into the chat like you always do. Let's go Mets. Catch you all later. Peace out.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out all the latest content on the channel.